This is another semester review. This one's going to be for speed. Alright, if we're talking about speed, there was only one formula associated with speed, and that was velocity equals distance divided by time, or the displacement divided by time. Okay, so there was a couple of topics we talked about. First of all, we talked about the difference between distance and displacement. Okay, when we talked about speed, we talked about the difference between distance and displacement. Distance is the total distance traveled. So, for instance, if you went 5 meters that way, and then 10 meters this way, the distance you traveled was 15 meters. Okay? Displacement was a little different. Distance is the total amount traveled. So you just add up this, and that's your distance. Displacement's a little different. So displacement would be like if you walked 3 meters this way, and then 4 meters this way. Your displacement is the distance from where you started to where you ended. And so that distance, in this case, would be 5 meters. Now your distance here would be this plus this. So the displacement would be the displacement would be 5 meters, and the distance would be 7 meters. All right. So anyway, that's one thing you will need to know. The other thing was the difference between speed and velocity, and the speed and velocity thing is very similar. Speed is equal to the distance over time, and velocity was the displacement over time. And please remember that these are not always, most of the time these two things are interchangeable, but there are those rare questions where it asks you a specific difference between speed and speed and velocity, or the specific difference between distance and displacement. Well, you'll need to know these things. So the difference here is if we had, just as an example, if we start here and we ran around a track, and the track had a circumference or a distance around the track of 100 meters, and we ran that in a time of, I don't know, what's a legitimate time to run 100 meters? 12 seconds. The velocity, if we started here and ended here, the velocity is equal to 0 in that case. However, because the displacement is 0, you started and stopped in the same spot. However, the speed includes the entire distance around the circle. So you would have to include the entire distance. You would include this 100. So the speed would be equal to 100 divided by 12. So that's the difference between speed and velocity. Another difference between speed and velocity is this. Velocity has a direction. So the velocity should always have some kind of direction. This direction may be positive, it could be negative, it could be right, it could be north, just anything that gives it a direction, just something that gives it a direction. Alright, the last thing we need to know about speed and velocity is if it is going at a constant speed. So if something is moving at a constant v, there's a couple of things we need to know. First of all, the formula associated with it is v is equal to d divided by t. And the second thing is that the graph of distance versus time will look linear. It'll be a straight line. And the graph of velocity versus time will be a horizontal line. All right. One problem that tends to get people, these are fairly simple problems because if you have the velocity and you have the time, you can usually find the distance, and vice versa for velocity, and then for distance or for time. The one thing that tends to get people, first of all, is if you have to find t. So if we're looking for t, let's say that the velocity is 10 and the distance is 30, and we're looking for t, remember that you have to multiply both sides by t before you can do anything. So it's got to be 10t equals 30 before you can do anything, right? So remember that. Also, remember, this is one of the primary ways people get messed up here. This is one problem on the constant speed stuff that gets people. And that's if we go 5 meters at 2.5 meters per second, and then we go another, 15 meters at 1 meter per second. This tends to get people because what people want to do, if I ask you for the average speed, what people want to do is they want to just go 2.5 plus 1 divided by 2 is equal to 3.5 divided by 2, 1.75 meters per second is the answer. But that's not what you do. Okay? The average speed is equal to the total distance divided by the total time. So the total distance here is fairly easy to figure out, right? The total distance is equal to 20 meters. But the total time is not exactly obvious. What we have to do is to find a time for this one, and we have to find a time for this one. So if this type of problem shows up on the test, make sure that you find the times for each of these and don't just do the speed 1 plus speed 2 divided by 2, because that's not going to work in this particular case. So here, for instance, if we did v is equal to d over t, we would get 15 seconds for this time, and we would get 2 seconds for this time. And so that would give us a total time of 17 seconds. And so 20 divided by 17 would give us 1.18 meters per second, which is clearly different than 1.75 meters per second. Okay? So this type of problem, if it's on the test, be careful about it, all right?